Hello YouTube, this is Geeky Austin, and today we are going to take a look at the NECA Atomic Blast Shin Godzilla. Who put the censor bar on him? Can somebody please remove the censor bar? Thank you. The NECA Atomic Blast Shin Godzilla. This Shin Godzilla stands at about a little over 6 inches tall from the top of his head. And here he is next to the NECA 1994 Godzilla and the Atomic Blast Godzilla 2001. And here he is next to two other Shins, the Bandai Movie Monster Series Godzilla 2016 Climax version and the original NECA Godzilla 2016. Okay, and before we get into the detail, paint, and articulation on this guy, I just want to go ahead and state that I definitely will feel unforgiving about this figure, but I will try to hold some judgments on some spots here that they actually did a good job. But all in all, NECA, this is a terrible, terrible release that you have done. It looks absolutely nothing like the prototype that you showed a few months ago. Detail-wise, it doesn't look bad, but the paint is this paint on this thing is a monstrosity. And like I said, is it worth the price point? Well, we'll find out. First off, into the detail department. The entire figure is pretty much exactly like the original NECA Shin Godzilla, which I can do a little bit of a side-by-side so you can see. The entire sculpt, from everything from the neck down all the way to the tails, it is the exact same sculpt. So, sculpt-wise, if you have this guy right here and you really do love how the entire sculpt on this guy was, then sculpt-wise, you will like this figure because, yeah, when looking at just the sculpt itself, it looks really good. All the bumps and ridges in the skin still look good, as well as the details on the gills on his side. The new head itself, they did a really good job on the inside of the mouth, showing all the different details right there. They did a really good job with that. The teeth don't look too bad. The skin flaps right there as well. All in all, they did do a pretty good job in terms of the detail on the way the head looks. And all in all, let me get a bit of a side-by-side here. All in all, I kind of think that the head on this guy looks a little bit better than what we got from the original 2016 version. But it still suffers from the same problem that these NECA Godzilla figures have. The heads are a bit too flat in my mind. I think that Shin's head is supposed to be a bit more rounded right here at the top. The same goes for this figure, which is why, even though in my original review I was very forgiving, thinking that this profile looks really good, but still, I think the head is just a bit too flat. They should have puffed it out some more right there on the top. But anyways, back to the detail. Again, the entire looks on the wrinkles on his legs. His claws still look really good. The spines overall on the entire figure, detail-wise, they still look just as good as the original Shin Godzilla did. And even the tail, it still looks good, but again, it does not have the mouth on the tip because they didn't bother to change that. Though they seem to have gotten rid of the ugly-looking bits of bone in the tail that the original NECA version had. Because, could you pick up, please? Thank you. They seem to have gotten rid of those in the detail department, unless the paint is just covering it up and I don't notice, but yeah, that's about the only difference in the sculpts that I can see, unless that's just paint covering it up. Okay, and on to the paint job. The paint job is where NECA, as I stated, they dropped the ball. The prototype pictures of this Godzilla figure showed it having pretty much the same type of paint job that the original 2016 version had, but they had a very interesting looking wash going on the spines to really give off a atomic blast effect like this figure is supposed to have. And it looked very nicely painted on the dorsal plates from the top all the way down to the tail, and even the tail didn't look so bad in the prototype. All in all, I felt that if they had kept that, this figure would have looked stunning in person. But instead, this is what we got. I'll get onto the spines in a sec. First off, I just want to talk about the paint job overall on the skin of the creature here. When comparing it to the original, yeah, like I said, they dropped the ball with the paint. I don't know how well it's going to pick up in the lighting I've got right here, but the blacks onto reds on the entirety of this figure, it's way more sloppy than how it came out on the original. And some of the best examples I can think of are on the sides, if I can get them in here good enough to where you can see. One sec. Like right here on the legs, hopefully if I were to mess with the shading just a bit, hopefully you can see that. Right here it is mostly black, but you can see tiny hints of red in throughout the crevices on his skin, which is actually how it's supposed to look. But then when you come to this side, you can see big red splotches going around in different parts of his leg. And it's like that for a majority of the figure. Because when you look at stuff like the hands, they also have a lot of red splotches going on in the hands itself. And the same goes for other sections. The arms right here, the back of his back right here, I mean. And even his tail has a bit more extra red splotches than what it's supposed to. And right there, it just looks awful right there. And then when it comes to the front, honestly, in terms of the red splotches, doesn't look as atrocious as the rest, but there's still got a little too much going on down here around the belly. If you can see that. They got a little too much going on down there. And then, of course, we got to the new paint apps. Because basically, when it comes to just the regular ones, the teeth, right quick, the teeth are painted alright. It's not too bad. The eyes don't look too bad. They don't look too off-centered. The claws don't look too bad either. Like I said, they did a good job in that area. But, yeah, then we get on to the main problem with this figure. The main problem with this figure is very obvious. It's the spines. The spines / dorsal plates on the figure here. Whatever it was they were attempting to do, it failed in execution. For whatever reason, the entire plates are molded in a very clear white plastic. Right here, clear white vinyl plastic. And then they went and added tiny hints of purple, pink in through the center area, and then what is up with this black? This black paint here makes me think that all they did is they took a thick paintbrush coated in black paint and just smeared it onto the top of the spines and then went, that's good, sell it. That is really what it looks like, because this looks awful. On close-up inspections, like I said, I can be just a tiny bit forgiving that I can see what NECA was trying to do. In the movie, Shin's entire back section lights up in a bright whitish purple when he goes to shoot out his beam, and his back beams and his tail beam. Now, I see what they were trying to do by making it a clear white at the bottom and then moving it up to the purples. I do see what they were trying to emulate, but the problem is there is no blending. None of the paint on here was blended at all. And if it was actually properly blended, especially when it comes to the black to the pinks, right here, this would have probably came out much better in person. and the rest can be said for the tail as well. There is no type of blending at all in the tail, so it looks like, again, they just took a paintbrush filled with pink and just smeared it all the way down the tail and didn't even attempt to do any blending. And then they went for solid white up here. And the tip of the tail, yeah, again, that's really what it looks like they did. They just took a white paintbrush and just dabbed the tail to death and didn't care about how the final result came out. There's barely any other thing on this tail but just white and black, but there is tiny hints of pink toward the top, but again, that is about it. And then, of course, for the neck, again, they just took some white paint and just dabbed it on there, but that looks the least bit offensive to the rest, except for that. That right there is just a nice slab of pink paint right there on the chest bone for no reason whatsoever. And then again, the interior of the mouth, they did do a decent enough job, I guess, with the way the paint looks on the interior of the mouth. I hope that can be seen. It does have a little bit of blending and shading going on in it, so I can be a bit forgiving of that. But yeah, again, all in all, when it comes to the detail in this figure, it's just as good as the original one, so in my eyes, it's fantastic, especially the new head sculpt. But the paint, oh my god, the paint is awful. I have no other way to look around it. This figure right here disappointed me the moment that I took it out of the package and saw it in person, because I'm sorry. Come on, NECA, you've done better. You've done really good with this figure, and you seem to be doing really good with some of your other recent releases in terms of paint. So, what happened here? What did y'all do? But okay, moving on from that, we now gone into the articulation. The articulation on this guy is exactly the same as the original Godzilla 2016. Everything on this figure is the same as the original. There's no new joints or anything. So with that being said, he does have ball joints right here in his head and into his neck, which can allow you to very limitedly move the head up and down because of the way it's designed. You can't get a whole lot of up and down movement or side to side, but you can get it to rotate. And as for the base of the neck right here, this figure sadly came out of the package extremely loose and several joints were stuck. And the neck was one of them. After I popped it back in place, it has now become just as loose as other parts here, and you can see what I mean in a sec. So yeah, you can get the head to look up about that far if you warm it up with some water, so that way it can move better. And then of course you can get him to rotate the neck all the way around, of course, and you can get side to side movement with it pretty decently. And you can get it to bend down, but the only problem is because since I had to warm up that joint and fix it, this is what I ended up getting. Yeah, the neck is extremely loose on mine, and I'm pretty sure it'll have a tendency to pop off if I'm not too careful with it. But if you're wondering, this is the way it came in the package, like this, and all that I did was get it to pose up just a little bit higher so that way he can look up a bit more. And anyways, moving down in the torso, he has a ball joint right there, which you can get just very limited side-to-side movement and rotation in it, very limited, and you can get a little bit of up and down. It's possible that you can get a lot more if you're a bit more rough with it, but after loosening so many joints on this figure trying to fix it, I just don't want to take the risk. But yeah, you get very limited movement in the torso. The arms, of course, have ball joints right here in the shoulders, which can get you to move them up about that much, down that far, and not a whole lot forward and back. And you can get just a little bit of rotation out of it, but again, it's very tough because of the sculpt, the way it's designed. And there is a hinge in the elbow, so you can get him to bend his elbow in that much and out that far. Again, very limited, but you can do it. And it's got a ball joint right here in the hand, which again is very limited. You can rotate the hand all the way around. I'm sorry for bumping the camera. And you can bring it in and out just a little bit, not by much. So like the original release, the arms are very limited, but what can you do with Shin's arms really? And then we move down to the legs. The legs are on ball joints, and they're on this type of joint system to where you can spread them in and out, which you would have to try to line up in order to get these seams to line up with the body. It's the same issue that the original NECA Shin Godzilla had, which of course that means that you have to play around with the legs to get them to look as natural as you want them to look. But yeah, you can get almost 360-degree movement out of it before it gets hindered. And like I said, you can get his legs to splay out about that much. You go any further, the leg is going to pop off, because trust me, it's popped off at least twice on mine while I was trying to fix it. And you can get him to come in about that much, so it's a very, very limited. And then moving down to the knees, you do have a hinge system right here in the knees, which allows you to bend his legs in about that much right there, and, well, look at that. Isn't that ugly? Again, terrible paint job, guys, terrible. But you can get it to bend in about that much, and you can spread them out about that far, so it's very limited, but you can get a little bit of it. And unlike the original NECA Shin release, this Shin right here has really good foot articulation. But again, the downside to it, focus please. The downside to it is that it's very loose. The legs, the feet I mean, can spin all the way around, and on this one here, it's got really, really decent ankle rocker movement from side to side, and some very decent up and down movement on it. And that's the way it is for both feet. This one has got even more range of up and down movement than the other. And that is something that I'm actually kind of happy about, because it allows me to be able to fix the legs in a perfect position to where I like it without needing to worry about the fact that his feet are going to be off. Because the biggest problem that I had with the original one, like I said, is that it's very difficult to get him to stand at a straight pose like he's supposed to be in the movie because of the way they designed the articulation joints. And then we move on to the tail. The tail has a total of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 ball joints, and from here up is of course a bendy wire like all the other NECA Godzilla releases. But yeah, that's where the problem on mine lies. For my figure, the joints are extremely loose, as you can see right there. Just to bring it up and then I let it go, it just droops back down. So it makes posing this guy really, really annoying. And I'm probably going to have to try to get something like floor cleaner or something on the ball joints to try to tighten them up. That is, if it's possible to do that on a NECA figure. I'm pretty sure it is. But yeah, there are ball joints, so of course you can get a little bit of side-to-side movement and up and down movement out of all of them. It's just, like I said, mine is extremely loose and likes to fall to pieces. And you can get them to rotate all the way around if you want. And the bendy wire, again, it is a bendy wire, so you can pose it in any way that you want to. You just got to be extremely careful, because over time the wire may break or it may pop out of the sculpt and tear up the figure. So again, just like with every bendy wire from NECA, you got to be extremely careful with it or you will break it. And that's the articulation. Okay, and finally for accessories, this NECA Shin Godzilla does come with 2 beam effects right here, which are just bendy wires sculpted over on top of them. And detail wise, again, pick up please, camera. One sec. Okay, detail wise, again, it doesn't look too bad. It does look like fire almost, or radiation beam effects and all. It does look really good. Of course, you can see the holes right there, because again, these are acting like bendy wires and all, because if they're bent out of place, you can just carefully correct it and get it as straight as possible. And like I said, they do have 2 metal tips right there, and these metal tips attach into Godzilla's mouth and to the tip of his tail. All that you got to do is just line them up and just insert them in. and that's the final result that you get. And honestly, I think it does look really good. The only downside of the beam effects is, just like with the figure, it's poorly painted. I don't know how easy that is to see, but that right there on that reflective spot on the tip right there, that's the only bit of clear plastic that is on the beam. The rest of it is a lightish pink paint that was just sprayed on way too much onto the beam effect. So you can't really get any kind of translucent effects going on the beam itself. And then of course the other downside to it, because it's translucent, got a bendy wire in it, you can see the bendy wire inside of it. So like I said, I can appreciate what they were wanting to do with making them bendy wire, so that way you can fix them if they come to you bent up or anything. But all in all, execution wise, it didn't work out very well. But I appreciate that they added some sort of particle effects to go with this Godzilla figure. Now, if they had added some back beams, I would have enjoyed that even more. Okay, so overall, again, this figure is just a major disappointment from NECA. And I'm sorry to say that. Detail-wise, it looks really good. It looks just as good as the original, which overall, in my opinion, was a really good sculpt to begin with. So they did a great job with the sculpt. The new head sculpt itself looks really good, and I love how it turned out. The beam particle effects are a nice little accessory to add a little bit more interest to the figure, but execution-wise, they're not as good. And the articulation on mine is extremely loose. But again, that probably is just my figure. It's not anybody else's, but it's still loose on mine. But again, it's where the paint apps are that they failed. If this figure was painted better, I would definitely recommend this figure and it would get a pretty good score. But because of the paint apps alone, which range from extremely sloppy to downright terrible, I cannot recommend this figure at all, which is disappointing to say because an Atomic Blast NECA Shin Godzilla was something that I was hoping they would do, but I was not extremely eager for it because I liked how their original one looked. But when they announced it, I was eager for it, but yeah, this is what we got. Like I said though, just to be forgiving, as I stated as much as I want to try to, I understand what they were trying to do with the way the spines looked, with the way the beam effect looked and all. I can understand and appreciate what they attempted to do. But, yeah, overall, this figure is terrible, and I do not recommend it. And thank you all so much for listening and watching. This has been Geeky Austin.